Taxing ranged DPS, both caster and physical ranged DPS, should not be a thing in Final Fantasy XIV anymore, or at least not to the level that we're currently seeing it be at. But don't take it from me. From the developers' own release job changes that they've stated, they've intentionally made the game easier for melee in their own official words. Not that that's really a surprise, as anyone who's been going into Savage content can see the fights are more melee friendly than they have ever been. And that's honestly been my genuine experience as well, from doing all of my 7 reasons to play on all the different jobs in this game, taking them through Savage. Since this is a topic that is so important to the fundamental fabric of Final Fantasy XIV, I'm going to also be doing a much larger panel with many other players ranging from melee week 1 clear teams and beyond, but I want to get my own thoughts out here before that, just independent. But I really do hope that people check out that, because many people give their insight into that, and I think that that is going to be, to say the absolute least, a discussion worth having and tuning into. To the topic, let's be honest, and it is a very upsetting and dark honesty, but ranged and caster DPS are largely brought to raids for one fact and one fact alone: that 5% roll bonus that you get from having one of each type of DPS. And if it wasn't for that buff, I guarantee you, I absolutely guarantee you, we would have seen many predominantly 4 melee DPS compositions tackling world first. And I say that if the 5% roll bonus was just given to the group without needing physical or caster range DPS. The difference between having 2 extra melee DPS would have easily helped groups overcome P8S phase 1 in Rage quicker. If groups weren't progging to that point on melee DPS, they probably would have swapped to it at that point. And obviously that fight was nerfed, but remember, the P8S nerf is only 1%, and that is going to be more than easily made up by the difference between either of the ranged category and melee. In fact, I know people who outright calculated if they are better off dropping physical ranged, bard, and dancer, and they barely made the cutoff without the roll buff. But that isn't a new thing this tier, and I think that it's shocking that a lot of people are kind of ignoring the past, because I've covered something similar before, and people were wondering, even back during 6.0 with the initial raid tier launch, what should be going on in terms of our team composition. Is a ranged DPS even worth taking? And I kind of laugh, because it's like, okay, now people are tuning in, but it's just like, it should be in general concerning at all that people are seriously considering dropping an entire role, if not 2 roles. In fact, this double melee meta is so strong that the overwhelming majority of statics have 2 melee, 1 caster, 1 physical ranged DPS. And don't take my word for it, never take my word for it. Just scroll down this page. See anything but 2s in this column? No, I'm not talking out my backside. Now I propose a question. How would it be damaging to the game to balance out these numbers? You can say in the comments section, because I'm actually curious who would be losing through bringing these numbers closer in alignment. Remember though that these aren't theoretical numbers, and that's why I focus on bringing these up. They're real numbers actual people are getting in the real game. What would be so bad about bringing everyone up at least a little bit closer to the same level? And unfortunately, I do know that we might hear resistance. So my question kind of remains though, why should a samurai whose rotation, respectfully, and I love the samurai, is easier than the machinists and less ping reliant now with the removal of chitin, but why is the samurai doing so much more than the machinist? Like, the difference is huge. And these are in fights that the developers have tailored to be melee friendly. Who is losing out by evening that playing field out? Moving on from that point, let's drag this back and talk about when melee DPS was really challenging to execute on fights such as E8S, not P8S, but I'm talking Eden's versus Shiva, and there was a significant reason for melee to want a higher damage number. That was really hard, and melee was still ideal. You saw double melee compositions everywhere, but they were far harder to pilot. Game design has shifted since then, and the devs have themselves now admitted that in the Paladin changes. Now I want to explore the ranged DPS tax a little bit, and checking out basic data for the Savage tier, one thing becomes very obvious. Melee DPS are top dog when it comes to being a DPS. Melee is the best at doing their job that they are brought to do: blow things up. Even Reaper, who has been largely regarded as being severely weak in the current state of the game, is clearly ahead of even Black Mage, who is certainly hand over fist above all other ranged DPS as a whole. We're not even talking Machinist, who is in the current tier honestly a bit of a meme. Like, the current meme that I'm loving is that the final raid of a raid tier was nerfed before Machinist was buffed. It actually hurts. But that's that ranged DPS tax playing out. The idea that because you have a more theoretical uptime on a boss that you should be capped at doing less damage than a melee DPS. Now I'm gonna live up to what people keep calling me on Twitter and Discord and everything, and I'm gonna be the himbo here. but which is harder to execute mechanics on consistently? And I want to know in the comments. And I'd argue this would be Hell and Prog, which would be more of a Hell and Prog, and an absolute nightmare fuel to play in Party Finder. Melee DPS with multiple gap closers, backwards, forwards, teleports, free range mobility, and hell, even Ninja has a movement speed passive. Or Black Mage. See, I said that I'd be the himbo. I'm asking the stupid questions here. But from my understanding is the overwhelming majority of players would say Black Mage is harder to execute, and that's why you hear about certain Black Mage creators all the time, and respectfully less so others. Because to pull off what they do on Black Mage is genuinely impressive, and anyone saying it's not is honestly kidding themselves or sucking on copium. Black Mage actually isn't that hard, and then they take it into Barbariccia and just get butchered. It was the tank's fault. And I say that not that any of them like Black Mages would like go to bat for me, but I'll be the one to say it, I guess. Black Mage is genuinely hard to play, and that's why people watch. They're like, oh shoot, this is impressive. So why is Black Mage behind all of these melee DPS then? If it's about uptime and difficulty, and that challenging roles deserve to do more DPS, and that's why we have the range tax, and to remove the range tax is somehow damaging the gameplay experience of these precious melee players, why is Black Mage not 20% or 50% above all other DPS? I know 50% is an exaggeration, but honestly, I think Black Mage is at least 50% harder to pull off some of these actual mechanics on. Like, there are mechanics that I can do brain off, like P3S, many mechanics that I can completely autopilot on Samurai or Ninja that I cannot execute on Black Mage to save my life. I don't think that's an unfair thing to say, though. Like, that Black Mage deserves higher damage. If we want to say higher DPS belongs to those who have a harder time executing, it is not the melee DPS in this current meta, current state of the game that the developers have gone towards. As someone kindly reminded me the other day, Cole, we are not in Gordius anymore. I miss being a teenager, screw you, Sean. But we're not in Gordius anymore. We are clearly seeing a design philosophy shift. But right now, I kind of feel like I've been the only creator actually speaking out about the Machinist for a little while now, and I'm not making this yet another Machinist video, but easily even the best of the best ranged physical DPS dancer, who frankly rides on the coattails of whatever melee DPS or Dark Knight opener, because that's insane, but whoever they partner up, even Dancer isn't comparable, which, considering Dancer squats over the Machinist and destroys them like a toilet after Taco Bell, speaks volumes for how bad the Machinist is right now. Ugh. I don't think many people who could safely drive would say, yes, I would trade in my Monk or my Samurai for a Machinist. Excuse me, sir, we want you to take a breathalyzer, calm down. We need you to stop. In fact, this double melee meta is so strong that the overwhelming majority of statics have 2 melee, 1 caster, 1 range physical DPS, and again, don't take my word on it, just scroll down any statistics. That is going to be a giant nope. If you scroll down the page, you're going to see 2s in that melee column. And thus, this bias towards melee DPS is so inherent that every single raid guide out there that is published assumes double melee. My own group has 2 casters, and one has to take the so-called fake melee positions. I laugh because I'm horrible, I know. I didn't demand them to go Samurai, but no one pulled me over for the breathalyzer before I could make that decision. But what I'm really trying to get at here is this fact is just so entrenched in our meta, and that should be concerning. You don't go to YouTube and search up a P7S guide and find a double caster strategy with a physical range or a double physical range. Instead, largely, what we're seeing is a physical range and caster DPS are chosen for one fact and one fact alone. That 5% roll bonus. It's kind of like what I was getting at the start. If it wasn't for that, I guarantee you when people were hitting that P8S phase 1 wall before the nerf, they would have swapped to 4 melee comps if it was more damage. Guaranteed. That's not a stretch to say, that's literally the logical conclusion. That people are going to be like, but that's a stretch. No, those groups are very highly tuned and they would swap. And at this point, until someone says something compelling otherwise, I genuinely believe that's the healthiest thing for the game. No job should be put into the current position that Machinist is in. It's just not right and it's just not fair. And obviously by extension, this is impacting like the entire caster role and the entire physical range role. Now I want to end this video on my own personal take. You know, a lot of people say a lot of things, but then they don't like apply it to themselves, you know, have a taste of my own medicine. At this point, unfortunately, if people asked me if I was playing a DPS, what would I play? Like, say I could never heal again, what job am I swapped to? I'd be on Samurai. Samurai, 100%. Not group dependent, absolutely hits like a truck, tons of mobility options, and I played it a ton last year and it was a blast, and the rotation allows me to really focus on mechanics. And like I said, I had a blast last year, so honestly, that answer should be as shocking as walking up to Limsa Lominsa and seeing a herd of minimally clothed cat girls, all played by men.